accomplishing with that. So they asked me to give an update for the 2018 report. This is a slide deck that we use with the Clean Water Council, so it doesn't cover everything, but it does kind of give you like a high-level look at the different things we do measure. It's available on both the PCA website and the Clean Water Legacy website. There's kind of a little 11 by 17 report card if you just want the high-level version. I have hard copies in my desk, and then there's the full-blown report, which I also have copies of in my house. You don't want to read the whole thing. The report card kind of gives you highlights. So we've been doing this since 2012. I've been involved since the 2014 report. And then there was some work that predated that to kind of come up with this list of measures and try to figure out how we measure things across the state. This involves all the water agencies. So you're talking PCA, DNR, Bowser, NPH, Department of Ag, the PFA, Bowser. We have Met Council in there as well. So it's bringing a lot of people together and trying to make sure that our measures kind of cover everybody's piece of the pie, and that we're not leaving stuff off, and that we're not burying everybody with too many measures. It's a bit of a dance. So we're supposed to kind of be reporting out so that the public can see what we're getting done. Kind of the basic premise of the report is we track investments. There's 4 measures dedicated to how that money is being spent, where it's going. Actions, kind of the bean counting type things. We sampled this many lakes. We got this many wells sealed. And then outcomes, which of course, as many of you know, are messier and harder to capture and take forever to get there. So we don't always have necessarily a target or something we're shooting for on them, because we're still trying to figure some of those outcome measures out. And then we have external drivers that are just going to be messing with everything over the whole course of this amendment. We have things warming up, we have changing land use, we have changing demographics, and all the efforts we can put into BMPs on the land are going to get skewed by that continually changing environment we're sitting in. And then we have to convince people to change their behavior if we want to see changes in practices on the ground. And that is definitely probably the squishiest thing that we have in here, is trying to wrap our heads around how do you deal with that engagement piece and changing people's behaviors. Not that anyone can read this, but this is the report card I was speaking to. So it kind of, in a couple of pages, will give you all of the measures broken down by whether they're investment, surface water, and drinking water. Actions and outcomes, and then the colored boxes, green, hey, we're doing great, yellow, and red, we're not making the progress we should be. We're not going to meet the goals that we have by the end of the 25 years worth of amendment funding. Trend is just that we either don't have enough information, we don't have enough to really know if it's going up or down, and then there are some instances where we know things are improving, we're getting more things on the ground, or things are going downhill. And then these 2 drivers at the bottom, we have an external drivers which talks, about climate, hydrologic modification, that kind of stuff, and then the social measures piece, which is dealing with kind of the people aspect of it, which I just went through and forgot the slide was here. So stop by if you want a copy of the report card, otherwise it's on our webpage. So just to kind of give you an idea of the measures within the report, they're about 2 to 4 pages, depending on the amount of detail in a specific measure. So at the top, you'll know what you're dealing with, whether it's surface water or groundwater. You will know if we're dealing with an investment, action, or outcome measure. There's a narrative kind of describing why does this matter, what are we doing, what progress are we making, and where you can learn more. There's web pages for all of these measures. We try to have some graphics in them. And then this chunk down here at the bottom, the status and description box, is the same thing that appears on the report card. We've been using the Clean Water Fund activities for both drinking water protection and surface water protection. It's been more concentrated when you look at the numbers on the watersheds that are more impacted. We've spent more money on the places where we have more issues. And based on data so far through the life of the fund, the Clean Water Fund dollars have leveraged about 73 cents in matching dollars, which is pretty cool. We expect that might start shifting downward a little bit due to some programmatic changes, but right now we're at about 3/4 of a dollar for every dollar Clean Water Fund. Some other highlights that we have in this particular report that we called out We're just about done with our watershed approach, so we'll be able to finally do that. Hey, we've got the whole state. This is what things are looking like. We've got a comprehensive look at our biology, our water chemistry. Public water suppliers are getting some credit in this report with some work that they've done on source water protection efforts. So that was kind of highlighted. And then groundwater resources, kind of getting that status on what our resources actually look like was another highlight for the 2018 report. On the surface water side of things, we called out some of the wastewater construction projects and best management practices. And I think I might have that chart later on kind of showing the progress that we have been able to make on the point source side of things. Air emissions of mercury, we're still making progress there. That the fish consumption advisories are really driven by the amount of mercury in the air, so we can track the air piece in a water report. And then we try to call some attention to the improvements that we made. It's not a huge list, but it's 46 lakes and rivers that have come off the impaired water system due to some sort of restorative measure that we changed an assessment or something, but that work took place on the ground and improvements occurred. And then we have one new measure for the 2018 report that we haven't had in previous reports. This was driven largely by the Metropolitan Council and some of the work that they've been doing. It does have a statewide piece to it, but kind of starting to take a look at water efficiency. How well are we taking actions out there to be smarter about our water use? So this is kind of the graphic that we put together. It was the first go at it. We're still getting some feedback on it. Water use has gone down on average in Minnesota, so the public supply, that blue line across the top. Other things we have to take into consideration is, on the dry years, we're irrigating more. On the wet years, we're not irrigating as much. So there's definitely some noise in here. But I'm just trying to wrap our heads around a way of trying to track efficiency, particularly in like the industrial and some of the municipal things that council actually has programs in place to help drive that. So we'll see how this one evolves over the years. It's new. So we'll take a quick look at the money piece. So what you see on this chart, the first report, the 2012 report, covered fiscal years 10 and 11. So these are all broke out by fiscal years, July 1 to June 30 on a biennium. The blue on the far right, as you're looking at it, is the most recent money that we had. So it's gone up each year. We're around $220 million for the appropriation for the Clean Water Funds, and it kind of lumps it into big buckets. How you can see that most of the money does go to on-the-ground implementation. That is the lion's share of the money. Drinking water protection, that has increased over the years, as that is considerably smaller than the implementation piece, but it certainly is one of the measures that is increasing. Monitoring and assessment is pretty leveled off. And then the RAPS work is also relatively stable, not big shifts in money. A couple other ways that we kind of chop up the money to take a look at where it's going. Since 2010, over $360 million has been awarded to non-state agency partners, so think local government units, SWCDs, watershed districts, and most of those awards are on restoration and protection, which makes sense from the previous chart. So you can kind of see how that has shaken out. Monitoring and assessment would be the data collection on the front end. Restoration and protection strategies is kind of that sitting down and looking at those impairments and figuring out where are the issues and what best management practices are going to work in this watershed to try to dial that back. And then the protection and restoration implementation, that's really that money that's kind of funneling through primarily Bowser to our local government units. And then the drinking water protection is mostly dealt with through the Department of Health. And then this just gives a snapshot of the leveraging. In the beginning, it was higher, and that was just some different programmatic things that were out there and kind of getting the Clean Water Funds rolled out the door. There was more local leveraging that was occurring. Now, kind of leveled off. There's some changes to some of the programs that we have and some federal programs that might shift that leveraging down a little bit further in the future. But right now, still quite a bit of money that's being matched. Yep.
So why do the blue bars consistently going up? Is it just more money being taken in? state? Or
Yeah, it's with the economy doing good, then there's more tax revenue. And then kind of one of the other ways that we take a look at it is, all right, are we spending it everywhere, or metro versus rural, that kind of a deal. So the one on the left, the one that's the blue, different shades of blue, that's kind of lumping everything together. So it's got statewide activities, things where we provide technical assistance, and that might be everywhere for certain projects. So everywhere is getting something, is essentially what the one on the left does. The one on the right is speaking more at implementation activities. So if you're yellow, less than $100,000 has been spent, up to the darkest blue is over $10 million. So there's a pretty wide range. We're just finishing monitoring in those couple of white watersheds in the far north, so things haven't moved very far. There also aren't a ton of impairments. There might not be a lot of local movement to get stuff going. So that's part of why we see the color shifts that we do. And then for the other activities, monitoring and assessment, we're coming back to those handful of watersheds that don't have any color on them right now. We've got the RAPS work going on everywhere, and then the drinking water protection. More money is being spent in the areas with sensitive aquifers. So the areas in the green and the blue, because they are sensitive, whether it's to pesticides, nitrates, whatever it might be. So that money is very intentionally focused in those areas. There is some work being done on a larger scale. So then I'll walk through a handful of surface water measures. Know that this is just a snapshot. There's more in the report or in the report card, whichever level you are more interested in. Probably the most boring measure, but we're really proud about it. We're finally making it through all the watersheds. It seems like an impossible goal a long time ago. So we're finishing up the last of the watersheds. The one in that pinkish color, the three up in the Rainy, and then the Redwood, Cottonwood, and the Blue Earth are getting wrapped up this year. We're finishing our last year's monitoring. We'll be doing assessments next winter. So that's a big deal. We're kind of hooking up how we will approach coming back into these watersheds, and we're changing the way that we're doing that. So this measure will get a fairly significant overhaul if it still remains in the next report. So we tap a lot of our money through local partners for monitoring, particularly on streams. It's something where parameters such as bacteria have a really short hold time. So for us to drive all the way up to Thief River and get it back to the lab in time is not terribly feasible. The other idea behind it is to build some local capacity. We do the monitoring, and then there's still all sorts of other work to go on. And if we can get them some equipment and help them get staff ramped up or get local citizens engaged. The picture on the top is actually a volunteer that was doing some lakes in the North Fork Crow watershed, and on the bottom, staff from the Redwood Cottonwood area doing stream sampling for us. So we pass nearly all of the money through for-stream chemistry. So that is nearly all done by local partners. Anything they can't do, my group takes care of. For lakes, it's a little bit more of a split. We take the larger resources or something that might have nitrates for drinking water, we'll grab that. Or, if there's wild rice concerns or any of that, the messier stuff, we'll make sure that we hang on to, but we do pass through a number of lakes. This also includes a look at our pollutant load monitoring network, which is also Clean Water funded, so that's kind of the chasing rain event. We have stations at the outlet of the Huckgate watershed, and then a handful of sub-watershed sites. And that is a really tight partnership with our pollutant load monitoring network unit and the local partners that they have on contract. So we have really good local participation. The other thing we wanted to take a look at, we know we have a pretty good handle on point source, and then the question is, well, is it random acts of conservation? What are we getting done on the land? So Bowser puts together a measure each year kind of showing where the projects are and the estimated pollution reduction loads. This is a lot of the information that gets stored into E-Link, if you're familiar with that, if you work with that system at all. So to date with the Clean Water Fund, you can kind of see the numbers up there. There's been a lot of easements, loans, and grants that have been passed out. Kind of the one thing that comes out every year is the request for projects is always more than the amount of money available. Even though a considerable portion of this pot of money goes to that implementation piece, the bulk of it, there's still about 3 times more requests than there is money. So it kind of goes into phosphorus reductions. you are not colorblind. The green ones, so the top numbers in each of those watersheds, and then the blue numbers on the bottom is the estimated sediment reduction. So they try to calculate that information and provide an update for each report. They are estimates based on the best modeling that we have. The municipal infrastructure, so there's a lot of money that goes through to municipalities for wastewater treatment infrastructure upgrades. So this is a picture from the City of Waterville. If you don't know your wastewater treatment plant, right? So 21 municipalities in the last biennium were able to do upgrades. And this is kind of a partnership between PTA and the public facilities. Surface water health. This is kind of our stoplight measure on what is the water quality looking like. We've gone out, we've done all the sampling. How are things looking? So the watersheds with the hash marks kind of in the central part of the state, we're assessing those right now. So we'll have updated information shortly. Those gray ones at the top and bottom, I mentioned we're finishing our monitoring effort. This is taking a look at aquatic life use. So are there fish? Are there bugs? Is there enough oxygen? Are nutrients and sediment concentration low? We don't have pesticides, other toxic issues. So what you see is these are the percent that are meeting our standards. So down in the southwest and the northwest, as might not be a shock to many of us who have been in the business for a while, is that where our land use is most hammered, our aquatic life does support. Some with down in the Cedar watershed in the Des Moines in the Missouri, like nothing supporting aquatic life. And that shifts all the way up to you get into the northeast, into the North Shore area, and everything is and then, of course, our transition zone, like you drive across the state, you can see this as you go through it. We start getting more development, more people. Yep.
When you say not supporting aquatic life, you mean like IBI assessments or?
So aquatic life use, so that includes IBI assessments, the chemistry, river eutrophication, TSS, DO, pesticides. So if for it to be meeting, it can't fail any of them. But if everything looks good, but your fish aren't good, then that gets you an option for it. So it's kind of the overall look at the use, trying to smash all of it together. We do map these also for aquatic recreation and for both lakes and streams, and then aquatic life and lakes you can do now. It's a similar pattern. I mean, it follows land use and practices and where we have the people. So Department of Ag has done some work kind of looking at their agricultural areas of the state and where we are seeing pesticides. We do have a handful of pesticide impairments in Minnesota. They're kind of looking at concentration in both lakes and streams to kind of get a handle on what's out there, what is it looking like. They are, so we've got chlorpyrifos, acetylchlor, and atrazine are on both graphs for the streams. The chlorpyrifos is so small you can't really see them. On the lake side, you know, these are percent detection frequency, so acetylchlor and atrazine on the left. Chlorpyrifos is just a count of detection, and these are just the years that they've been doing the program. Same deal for the streams is kind of the concentration percentage, and I can get you more info on the pesticide piece. They get very into the weeds very quickly. The long and the short of it is, it really depends on what the weather is like and what kind of the agricultural practices at the moment are like, if we're going to see issues. We do have a handful of impairments on streams. We don't have any on lakes, right, Dave? I think we're safe on the lake side, but there are some streams with pesticide impairments. Restored water. So I mentioned earlier that we had 46 lakes and streams at that standard. The bulk are in the metro. There's a lot of money in the metro to do work, and you have a lot of local jurisdictions that are kind of set up ready to go. So that's part of what's driving that. We do have some success stories in outstate. A couple of the newer ones in southwestern Minnesota, First Fulda Lake and Lake Shakopee were both removed off the list due to a lot of local work. Watershed districts, local landowners, they truly are success stories. They've done a lot of work, a lot of local engagement. So it can be done. I think the Poplar River just got some attention on NPR with their water month that they're doing, kind of talking about how they got the Poplar River turned around. So they're starting to get some attention, but a lot of work done here in the Metro. Mercury trends. So this is where I mentioned that we have to measure the air in order to see if we're making progress on a water issue. So this is kind of a twofold measure. We have kind of our concentration of mercury in northern pike and walleye, kind of the typical game fish that you're going to catch here in Minnesota. So the mercury concentration in the fish has been trending upward. So we're starting to see, and no, it's not huge, and there's variability in there, but it is increasing. What we have on the left are kind of the benchmarks, what we are trying to hit for that PMDL that's in place to deal with air emissions of mercury. So we are not at the moment slated to be on target for our goal. We're not quite going to be there. We have made a lot of reductions to coal. I think some of that is plants going offline, but reductions are there. Kind of some of the pieces that are left are kind of personal choices. You know, are you doing LED or the CFL? The CFL were a great jump for the light bulbs, but now we have mercury. So some of the skin lightening creams that are on the market contain a lot of mercury. There's other things where our intentional purchase of it is kind of bringing it into the wood stream. So those are places where we still need to make some headway. The phosphorus trend, again, this is more up. You're not up on your wastewater treatment pictures. So we mentioned earlier that there have been a lot of grants out there for wastewater facilities to do upgrades. The discharge has been reduced by 70% since 2000. I think we have, we don't have a chart. There's a really cool chart where it just kind of shows all the work that has been done with wastewater upgrades and the drop that we're seeing in phosphorus as a result. That chart is in the report. So if you like charts,
are those wastewater upgrades linked to what PMDL or RAP usually?
You know, I don't know the grant funding process, but my guess is probably a waste load allocation isn't going to hurt if you need to hit a target. But I don't know. Still done as the contact for on our side, but I can. It's likely listed out in the measure. I just don't have it in my head. So then the second half of the report kind of focuses on drinking water and groundwater measures. Not all of the measures relate specifically to drinking water use. A lot of these are driven by the health department. They kind of have authority over the bulk of that resource. So we currently have a goal that vulnerable community water systems, so those that are drawing from a system and it's vulnerable. So it has either soils that are going to let things, kind of trickle down or whatever it may be exposed to an impaired resource, would have some sort of source water protection going by 2020. Right now, a little over half of those are taken care of. They're not likely going to hit the goal. So we're a little short there. They're, the ones that are left are going to require a pretty significant amount of state agency staff help. They're the smaller communities that just simply don't have the capacity to take on this work. So kind of the ones that are left are going to be the ones that require a lot of heavy lifting on the state side. So there are a lot of grants out there for source water protection activities. A lot of it is to try to encourage the local systems to do some of this work. And of course, I should have looked it up before I came down. The 4 communities on the left, and I apologize, I don't remember them, won awards this year for the work that they have done. St. Cloud is up there, I think City of Brandon, and the other 2 I'm not remembering off the top of my head, but just kind of really trying to acknowledge that these local partners are really kind of picking up some work on this source water protection. Nitrate monitoring and reduction. So this is looking at places where they are sensitive to nitrate. So that's not the entire state. You can kind of see the portions where they've done the monitoring. This is the Department of Agriculture's township testing program, predominantly. So they're looking for well monitoring for nitrate, and they also do a bunch of kind of work to try to engage folks, talk about irrigation practices, talk about nutrient management on farm activities. So just getting more testing done and getting more people involved. So you can see the darkest green and kind of the yellow color along the Minnesota River. Essentially, that's kind of the work coming in this current biennium. Contaminants of emerging concern. So this is taking a look, Health Department taking a look at, okay, what contaminants are there and what ones do we need to prioritize and be most concerned about. So the Health Department comes up with health-based guidance values. So these are the analytes that they looked at in FY16 and 17 and the guidance that they produced based on that. So there's algotoxin up there, some of the PFOS type things are showing up, solvents, industrial chemicals, all sorts of good stuff. County Geologic Atlases, that's something that falls under DNR and the Minnesota Geologic Survey. So that's trying to get a handle on what information is out there. Take a look at how we have some are complete, the darkest blue are complete, and then the lighter blues are either in progress or under revision. There are 12 counties that they're working on, kind of those ones that are bolded to try to get those large agricultural areas covered. Long-term monitoring wells. So this is a split between the Department of Agriculture, which I realize on the map is a little tricky to see. The green dot is where the MDA's pesticide monitoring program occurs. The blue triangles would be our groundwater quality monitoring network. Sherry Cronin and others work on that. And then the red diamonds are the Department of Natural Resources looking at water level. So this is just kind of taking a look at where we have long-term monitoring going for our groundwater network, and essentially calling out that we don't have enough information to really wrap our heads around groundwater for most of the state. We have a lot of wells out in certain areas, but there's plenty of other areas where there's nothing. We don't have a great understanding of what's going on. But the funds have allowed us to increase the scope of those networks so that we can get more information. This is a Health Department measure looking at unused groundwater wells. So this is a big avenue for groundwater contamination. There's wells out there that are not being used and not capped. So 3/4 of us drink groundwater. So this is important. So the Clean Water Funds provide cost share to help get those wells sealed. So the chart is just kind of showing you the number of wells and borings that have been sealed. Now this, of course, predates 1990, or predates the Clean Water Fund here in 2008. But you know, more work is being done to try to get that more grant funds are available to get more of those wells sealed. This one, all the pesticide ones are messy. Pesticides are messy. This is a groundwater quality one looking at the pesticides in groundwater. So it's similar to that surface water one. This has a couple of other parameters in it, metolachlor and metribuzin, in addition to the acetylchlor and the atrazine that was in the surface water one. This doesn't contain, this doesn't show chlorpyrifos. So this is looking at the regular sampling monitoring network wells, private drinking water wells, springs, so they kind of look at a suite of places. The private wells are limited to kind of the vulnerable areas of the state for pesticide contamination. Some areas do have pretty high detection, like you will see a lot of hits. They won't be super high concentrations, but there are areas where there are elevated hits. Same deal with nitrates. There are some places where it's consistently high. You know, and certainly that's also starting to show up in the surface water with like the Fairmont Shale Lakes and whatnot. So, so this is just a detection frequency out of the samples they collect, how often we see different parameters. All right, community water systems. So that would be, I believe, it's about 3,000 people or larger, kind of falls into the community water systems bucket. So they've been able to kind of ramp up that source water quality monitoring and source water protection work. So this is just kind of calling that out, that we're working on getting better information on the sources of the drinking water, particularly for groundwater. This nitrate and arsenic concentrations in new wells, this is one that's kind of also a longer-term measure that the Clean Water Fund roadmap calls out. If you're familiar with that document at all, that's kind of like we'll get this many more lakes we can swim in, this many more fishable streams, and we want to have drinking water under control for nitrate and arsenic. So there's parts of the state where either due to geology, like in the case of arsenic, kind of in the Red River Valley, for instance, it's just naturally high. And other areas, kind of land use driven, like the nitrate situation down in the heavily agricultural areas. The concentrations are elevated, and they both have acute and chronic health problems if that is your source of drinking water. So this chart is just showing nitrate concentrations in new wells. Anything that's red, and granted, you have to kind of zoom in on the scale here. Percent of new wells, you know, this is 1% is this one here. So it looks scary, but you know, it's about 1% of the new wells exceed the safe drinking water levels for nitrate. We have similar information for arsenic, and are starting to gather more of that. Groundwater levels, you know, certainly Whitver Lake and other things have drawn a lot of attention to this of late. But, you know, DNR is trying to do more work on tracking what our groundwater levels are looking like. So 81% of the wells, this is like the wording on this one is kind of funky. So we're looking at things that only have at least 20 years of data. So 81% of them show either little change or a rising trend. So the groundwater actually is filling it back up. But that leaves 19% that are seeing drawdowns. So what it is allowing, what these funds are allowing them to do is to expand the monitoring network so they can get better information and have a better understanding of what our groundwater looks like and where we're going to be running into trouble. I mentioned this water efficiency one earlier. This is kind of our new measure, so this will kind of evolve as we go through time. And then we get into the squishier stuff, social measures. This is kind of looking, you know, are we building local capacity? Are we changing people's behaviors? Are we kind of getting out there? So Department of Ag has done a lot of work with social science. And they have some local advisory teams that are kind of helping them figure out how are we going to change the way that we interact with people, how are we going to change the way that we do our work so that we're having a positive impact on people. So this is kind of calling out a couple of examples. DNR has also done a fair amount of work on how they can better communicate with our soil and water conservation districts. Like, if not even worry about the citizen, like, are we even communicating effectively and getting to our local partners? So they've been able to change the way that they interact with folks, better tailor the information to the end user, which seems like it's not rocket science, but we're scientists, we're bad at it, right? So this is work that's trying to help us either work directly with our local constituents or like our local government units and try to improve our interactions to hopefully make some changes on the ground. And then external drivers, the thorn in our side kind of deal. So this is just throwing a couple of charts out from that. This is looking at acres and how, you know, clearly this is nearly 100-year scale here. We used to have, you know, a much more mixed landscape out there, and now it's pretty much everything's in corn, which shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, but, you know, that is definitely changing the landscape that we're playing in. You know, really nitrate-heavy crops over and over and over again. Also ones that don't provide a whole lot of cover. And then, you know, you can rural versus urban, you know, how much more imperviousness do we need? And we're paving it all. So this is kind of taking a look. The blue on the right, or on the left-hand side, would be the Twin Cities metro, and then Rochester and St. Cloud, and just the percent of our area that is impervious continues to increase. And then this last one is kind of looking at our shift in our population. You know, we're becoming more urban. There's fewer people in the rural areas. We also have some other information about demographics where, the shift of our population as a whole. It's going to play into how we communicate with people. How do we, if there's fewer people out in rural Minnesota, but they all own 10 or 20,000 acres, we need to figure out how to do engagement with those folks. And then, of course, this is, throughout the climate change, we're getting warmer, we're getting more rain. It's going to kind of change the landscape. It's going to change how, we're seeing declining concentrations in some things, phosphorus and TSS in particular, but we're shooting a whole lot more of it through because we're having more rain and larger rain events. So even though we're turning the dial down on some of those things and making some progress, the change in our climate is kind of knocking that out. So that's what I have. Like I said, it's a snapshot of what's in the report. There's contacts in there for anybody, there's webpage links, and then we have like a whole metadata document if you wanted to try to recreate what we did or see what kind of data was used. That's all available online, and I certainly can kind of be a resource here at the agency for it. Bill Dunn and Dave Miller in the Watershed Division and Suzanne Hansen also sit on the team for PCA. Are there any other questions?
I was just curious if the other 3 categories, do they do reports like this, or is it just us? We want to show that we're making good use of it.
Excellent question. The Clean Water Legacy page, what is it? I think it's just legacy.com, but I do not remember off the top of my head. They have a tab for each of these sections, so I'm guessing that there probably is some level of reporting. There's certainly projects that are funded. What those dollars show up kind of, what we did kind of a thing. I don't know if it's like a concerted report.
Yeah.
So wasn't the Clean Water Land Legacy Amendment only for 25 years? How many years do we have left? And do you have any sense of what the state is going to do once that expires?
Panic. The money shuts off in 2034. So we're getting there. So this performance report is kind of like what did we get done in the last 2 years? Kind of that sort of a measure. They put together the roadmap, and I don't know, the next iteration of it is coming next year. So it's like a look every 5 years. How close are we getting to our goals? And that report set 2 groundwater goals and 2 groundwater drinking water goals and 2 surface water goals. Surface water being, we're going to have, I think it's either 7 or 8% improvement in lake water quality and a 7% improvement in fish, essentially in the aquatic life based on fish. And then on the groundwater side was nitrate and arsenic. And looking at the information that we had based on our assessments, based on groundwater information, land use on the ground, kind of those external drivers I just talked about. We know that with our climate warming up, we're going to have bigger slopes of rain, with our land use changing. And they kind of forecasted, all right, if we've got 25 years of this money, where do we think it will get us with current land use practices, current behaviors on the ground? And it's pretty small numbers. It's like 7 or 8% improvement. So I believe that the hope for that document is we're not going to get there with 25 years worth of funding. Just to kind of set that expectation early, I think that's part of what drove Dayton's 25 by 25 initiative. Okay, clearly we need to do more. So it's tried to spur some of that stuff on. I am curious to see, and I'll kind of be in the thick of it, but where they go with that roadmap. I think the intention was to be we know we're only going to get this far, so if we want to get further, how do we do that? Do we continue the work that we have with this amendment and either go for another amendment or get legislative funding? But that's kind of the hope, is that we can be tracking this progress, that for reasons X, Y, and Z, we're not going to get there. And if people still consider this to be something that's high priority for them to have better water resources, then the public needs to be willing to dedicate the funding. So that's what I got at this point,
So, Pam, you just mentioned the XYZ reasons. As I understand, these small percentages for improvement have to do with assuming offsetting land use changes and so on that go against it. So I mean,
Yeah, there were some, the roadmap was done by basin, and there were places like the Cedar and the Missouri and the Des Moines where we don't have a lot of land. You know, it's a small area, but they're pretty hammered, and if we can hold the line and not have it get worse in 25 years, we would call that success. So like overall statewide, we want to see that increase, but there's places where we don't expect that we're going to be able to measure an increase. Yeah.
wholesale changes in farming practices would be the only thing that would break really big changes.
So take on the farm bill, John. I agree with you. There's plenty of people I've had conversations with that you should talk to your local legislator. Yeah, there's things that are well outside of our control. Were you trying to get in?
Yeah, well, I was just thinking along those lines then, going back to where the funding that's appropriated, as we have more resources to do more monitoring, do you think that there would be a shift to gear more towards implementation?
They have, that has been made abundantly clear at the Clean Water Council and at the legislature that monitoring and restoration and protection strategy development, they're super not interested in. We just need to get it on the ground. So we are expecting monitoring to probably slowly go down over time. I think both monitoring and RAPS took a pretty good hit last legislative session, and I anticipate that probably is not going to be unusual.
Because I mean, obviously you need to expand your monitoring network so you can have sufficient information that there's things going on, but at some point, we maybe hit that sweet spot, right, where they've got a pretty decent.
Yeah, we're hoping with, and that's part of that map, yep, it's monitored everywhere. You know, as we come through the second time, we've tried to change our framework for monitoring so that we're getting enough so that we can track change with what we've been putting on the ground, and then try to address some more local or watershed-specific needs, whereas before it was a cookie cutter everywhere. So we're hoping that, you know, if we're helping, you know, steer, I mean, in theory, we've done our strategy development, Bowser's coming in, helping them with their planning efforts. Maybe they know exactly what area they want to focus in on, and then maybe we can help with some monitoring in that area. So we're trying to navigate that one.
You mentioned a little bit ago that there are a lot of things out of our control, like the Farm Bill or other things that we just can't fix. And yet, I'll bet that the general population in Minnesota thinks that by passing the Clean Water Ligament, that amendment, we're going to fix everything within that 25-year period. So the perception versus reality is really important. I'm wondering if in a report like this, you have the ability to point some of that out.
So in the introduction, it's like a 2-page introduction, we do talk about you know, the forecast to change is not all that great, and that to try to accelerate things, there's been other efforts. You know, in this particular report, we called out the 25 initiative. I think that's kind of what I'd like to see where the roadmap goes in 2019, because that was the tool that the commissioner level folks came up with. Like, this is how we're going to try to argue with the Clean Water Council and the legislature that, guess what, it's not going to get us there. And these are the things we need to do to get there, or it's going to take this much longer to get there. And there's certainly been, there will be changes with the new administration in the commissioner league. Shannon's up there now, Rebecca's retired, so it'll be curious to see where that next iteration goes and how much press they give it. We'll be at, like, based on the money actually being out the door, we'll be at about the 10-ish year mark. So what if we accomplish, you know, a little over a third of the way through the fund and start having a probably a more blatant conversation about it. But I mean, I think there's also, we're a little bit at the whim of what the next administration looks like too, whether that's a topic that they want to talk about or not. So.
Another question. So I remember when this amendment was being voted on, Edward Lauderman, he's an economist, writes for the Pioneer Press, this column. He wrote a column saying that he was opposed to the amendment because when other states have done similar types of amendments, what happens is there becomes a dedicated fund to that source, and then the legislators just take away money so that the total amount of money spent on a given issue is always the same.
Mhm.
So I'm wondering if that has happened, or whether you even know whether that's happened with the clean water legislation. So with this dedicated fund, has the legislature cut back funding for other things?
I think,
Not the intent of the amendment, right? But
yeah, certainly, that was not the intent of the amendment. There's a, what is it? The plan, yeah, don't supplant, so don't take the money, general fund or environmental fund money away. You know, when we look back at what we had before the amendment, like, we didn't really have much of a monitoring budget, period. Like, we had one person doing lakes, and we had 2 part-time people doing streams. We didn't have any load network. Like, we straight up didn't have, on the monitoring side, you know, we added a couple of units with this amendment. So that's all new work and certainly accelerated work. And, you know, there was growth on the watershed side or change in direction and how the work was done, and certainly more state dollars dedicated to that. I don't have a decent handle on the other state agencies, if it played out the same way. My understanding of it is, you know, we were making this kind of much progress before, and now we're doing this, you know, we have more resources and more staff that we're able to dedicate to things. So I don't think there was too much of that, simply because there just wasn't much money there, period, before, for a lot of this work.
Seems like a very comprehensive report. Were there any things that you did not report on because it was maybe more federally funded and Clean Water Fund didn't have a direct impact on?
So the report does try to really focus in on, like, short of kind of calling out that leveraging piece. A lot of it is what was done with the fund. There's a little bit of bleed over, I think, on some of the health department stuff. I don't know on our side how much of that there is occurring. But yeah, there's certainly, you know, federal dollars, local dollars that are getting stuff done that aren't accounted for here. This is just what's kind of coming out of the amendment.
Right, and the monitoring trends would reflect some of that combination of state and federal funding.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Anyone on that?
Yep.
Bill Thompson in Rochester, did I hear you say you could sort of take a regional cut at some of the data that was presented here and look at it, let's say for Southeast or Southwest or whatever, Minnesota? Is that possible with the way that this has been prepared?
Depending on which ones you're looking at, it would be easier to do than others. I could certainly chat with you about specifics if you had specific ones you were interested in. You know, we all have kind of our raw data files, and it's just a matter of how the different programs collected their data. But yeah, the measures tend to be statewide, but it's data that we would have at a smaller scale. So shoot me a message, Bill, and we can talk through it.
Okay, yeah, we'd be interested in nitrates, phosphorus, some of the cropping patterns, that type of thing. So appreciate it, Pam.
Yeah.
Any more questions? No, if not, Pam, thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks